In the late 1970s, Northern England lived under a shadow. Women changed their routines. Streets emptied earlier. Parents warned their daughters not to walk alone. Police lines were flooded with tips. And newspapers printed one name again and again: Peter Sutcliffe, later known as the Yorkshire Ripper. Sutcliffe carried out a series of brutal attacks that terrorized communities across Yorkshire and Greater Manchester between 1975 and 1980. His crimes were not only tragic for the victims and their families, they exposed deep flaws in policing, prejudice in investigations, and fear embedded in society. This is the story of how one man's violence reshaped Britain and the tragic consequences that followed. Peter William Sutcliffe was born on June 2nd, 1946 in Bingley, West Yorkshire. He grew up in a working-class family, the oldest of 6 children. By most accounts, his early life appeared ordinary, but behind that ordinary image were tensions. Sutcliffe reportedly had a troubled relationship with his father, who was described as harsh and domineering. Family dynamics were strained. As he grew older, he struggled socially and professionally, moving between various jobs before becoming a lorry driver. In 1974, Sutcliffe married Sonia Surma. Friends and colleagues described him as quiet. Nothing outwardly suggested the scale of violence he would later unleash. Yet, sometime in the mid-1970s, something changed. On October 30th, 1975, 28-year-old Wilma McCann was found murdered in Leeds. She had been attacked and killed in what police initially believed was an isolated incident. But it was not. Over the following months and years, more women were attacked. Some survived, others did not. The pattern was disturbing. Many victims were women who were vulnerable. Some were sex workers. This detail would later play a controversial role in how the investigation was handled. Police did not yet know dealing with a serial killer, but the violence continued. In January 1976, 42-year-old Emily Jackson was killed. Later that year, 20-year-old Irene Richardson was murdered. The attacks showed similarities: blunt force trauma followed by further violence. Fear began spreading throughout Yorkshire. But perhaps the most tragic aspect was this: police publicly suggested that women should avoid going out alone. Instead of focusing solely on the perpetrator, warnings were directed at potential victims. By 1977, the killer's attacks were increasing. Marcella Claxton survived a hammer attack in May 1976. Tracy Brown survived in 1977, but others did not. In April 1977, Patricia Atkinson was murdered in Bradford. Her body was discovered in her flat. The killer had escalated. He was entering homes. Then in June 1977, 16-year-old Jane McDonald was murdered. Unlike some previous victims, she was not a sex worker. She was a shop assistant. Her death changed everything. Public perception shifted. The idea that the killer only targeted sex workers, a belief that had influenced investigative priorities, collapsed. Now it was undeniable. All women were at risk. The fear intensified. The investigation became one of the largest in British criminal history at the time. Thousands of officers were involved. Over 2 million vehicles were checked. Tens of thousands of men were interviewed, yet the killer remained free. One of the most damaging errors involved what became known as the Wareside Jack hoax. In 1978, police received letters and audio tape from a man claiming to be the killer. The voice had a Sunderland accent. Investigators became convinced the murderer was from Sunderland. As a result, suspects without that accent were disprioritized. Peter Sutcliffe, who had been interviewed multiple times by police, did not have a Sunderland accent. He was questioned at least 9 times during the investigation. Each time he was released. Critical evidence, including suspicious behavior and inconsistencies in his statements, was missed or dismissed. Meanwhile, the attacks continued. In 1978, Sutcliffe murdered Yvonne Pearson, whose body was not discovered for months. He also killed John Jordan in October 1977. Police later discovered that Sutcliffe attended her funeral, a chilling detail that revealed how confidently he moved among the community. In 1979, 19-year-old Josephine Whitaker was murdered in Halifax. Then in 1980, 20-year-old Jacqueline Hill, a university student, was killed in Leeds. Each crime deepened the fear across northern England. By now, Entire communities were living under informal curfews. Women organized protests criticizing police for their handling of the case and for suggesting that women restrict their own movements. The psychological damage extended far beyond the immediate victims. On January 2nd, 1981, Peter Sutcliffe was arrested, not for murder, but for driving with false license plates in Sheffield. During question, officers became suspicious. Eventually, Sutcliffe confessed. He claimed that he had been on a mission from God to kill women, particularly sex workers. Later, psychiatric evaluations would explore his mental health, but the court ultimately found him fit to stand trial. In May 1981, Sutcliffe was convicted of 13 murders and 7 attempted murders. He was sentenced to life imprisonment. The case left deep scars. Families were devastated. Survivors carried trauma for life. Public trust in police was shaken. The investigation was later heavily criticized. An official inquiry concluded that the police had made significant errors, particularly by focusing too narrowly on the hoax letters and by allowing bias regarding sex workers to shape priorities. The case also became a turning point in discussions about violence against women in Britain. Peter Sutcliffe spent decades in prison, much of it in secure psychiatric facilities. He died in custody in 2020, but the consequences of his crimes remain part of British criminal history.